the blood of the pistol and the what's that fucking song?
Okay, first of all, Grease 2 is meant to be campy.
But it's shit.
Remember when we first met John McClane? Argyle picked him up from the plane and took him down the Nakatomi Tower at the Christmas party. And the terrorists were overzealous, but it was sweet when they killed Ellis. And with a little help from Alan, John McClane kicked ass.
Welcome back to Shat The Movies, the podcast where we answer the question, were the movies we loved when we were growing up really that good? Have you ever caught yourself thinking, why don't they make movies like they used to? Can you still remember spending your Friday night searching for the perfect movie rental at Blockbuster Video? Do you know what Blockbuster Video is? If you answered yes, then this is the podcast for you. I am one of your hosts, Gene Lyons, and alongside me are my co-hosts, Ash the Colonel Brachenko.
Hi, y'all.
And Big D Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
And each week we take a look back at time and decide if our favorite films still hold up. The movies we cover are chosen by you, the listeners, who generously commission the films you love. If you'd like to see all the movies we have covered, will cover, or want to choose one for yourself, please visit shatthemovies.com and have a look. At the end of each podcast, we'll provide you, the audience, with the number of wipes each movie would take to get off your respective butts. So thank you so much for listening. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and share with a friend. That's how we help the podcast grow. Additionally, subscribe to our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review TV series such as Westworld, Lovecraft Country, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, True Detective, and Watchmen. Find all that information and past episodes at shatontv.com. Finally, to hang out with us live all week long, follow and subscribe to our Twitch channel, shatthemovies.com/Twitch, where we play video games, host watch parties, and have special events. All that being said, Big D, what movie are we reviewing today?
We are reviewing one of the pivotal moments in my life and one of the quintessential 1980s films that Shat The Movies is founded on. So I was elated when I got an email from Huang saying that he wanted us to go back to 1984, join the Wolverines, and review the 1984 war action film, Red Dawn.
Well, our Red Dawn commissioner wrote in and said, "Hi, Shat Crew. Having thoroughly enjoyed listening to your many movie reviews of many movies that were part of my teenage and early adult years, I have found your takes on these films often more entertaining than the films themselves. You guys have the ability to find pleasure in an absolutely horrendous movie. This has inspired me to support the show. Some films have stood the test of time while others have aged very poorly and could only have been made at a certain place and a certain time. I have decided to commission this movie not because it is my favorite movie or by any standards a good movie, but it's a movie I hadn't thought about for a long time, but I do remember enjoying but not fully understanding it when I saw it as a 10-year-old. The movie I'm talking about is the 1984 film Red Dawn. Growing up in suburban Australia, I remembered only catching the second half of this film on television back in '88 and seeing this all-star cast, including Patrick Swayze and Jennifer Grey of Dirty Dancing, and Lea Thompson from Back to the Future. I'd probably just seen these movies recently, so I thought it was cool that they were all in this film. Having only seen half the movie, I convinced my parents to rent it at the video store. It had become a weekly rental by this time. My recollections of watching it in its entirety was how cool it was that there were these high school kids that could take on an army with all these guns. Being 10 and in suburban Australia at the time, I had no grasp of concepts like 2A, conservative politics, Cold War politics, rural small town America, etc., basically some of the themes explored in this film. I intend to watch this film again before you review it to refresh my memory, but I am suspecting it has not aged well, given the 2012 Chris Hemsworth remake, which I have not bothered to watch, didn't exactly set the world on fire. There was also the 2010 Australian Red Dawn clone, Tomorrow When the War Began, starring Chris Pang, who was in Crazy Rich Asians. I unfortunately did see that film, and it feels like a horrible, cheap knockoff. Lucky for you, you probably never heard of it. Cheers.
That is accurate. I have not heard of it. I had also forgotten until you commissioned Red Dawn that there was a Red Dawn remake, which I also haven't seen. But, you know, doing more than 200 movies for this podcast over like half a decade, which is kind of scary. I thought I'd been through every bit of nostalgia possible. I'd totally forgotten about weekly rentals. Like when a movie was in the rental place for so long that they're like, you don't have to return it tomorrow. You can keep it for a whole week. And we're like, great. I could watch it as many times as I want. Like, were we that bored?
I think we have become that spoiled. The fact that, we can, watch whatever we want. Now, I'm thinking about like this new Space Jam, which, by the way, spoiler alert, is awful. But I took Finn to go see it in theaters, but it's also on HBO Max. So think about this. He was super stoked about this movie. He got to go see it in a theater, and every day since then, he's come home from school and watched it on HBO Max. So you get to sit in the theater and enjoy it and watch it at home. Like, kids today, they don't know. They don't know the struggle.
As long as he's not watching The Sandlot, I encourage it.
Oh my God.
Yeah, but the 2012 version had an issue with the bad guys, if I'm correct, where they didn't know who to make it. It was originally like this movie was going to be the Chinese with the bad guys, but at some point, a large Chinese firm made an investment into the production company, so they had to change it. Something similar happened with the 2012.
We don't want to upset the Chinese investors, so we're just going to put it in the plot line that 400 million of them die.
Well, they valiantly died, so that means they put up a good fight. But that was why I think the 2012 Hemsworth version was kind of like a wishy-washy hodgepodge of bad guys. It doesn't work unless you have a foe you can truly fear.
Iranians are always there. Pick us. Cast me. We're always good for a villain.
I agree.
Well, Red Dawn is a 1984 action film directed by John Milius. It stars Patrick Swayze, Charlie Sheen, C. Thomas Howell, Lea Thompson, Jennifer Grey, Ben Johnson, Harry Dean Stanton, Ron O'Neal, William Smith, and Powers Boothe, and was the first film to be released in the U.S. with a PG-13 rating. The story follows a group of American high school students who resist the Soviet occupation of the United States with guerrilla warfare, naming themselves the Wolverines after their high school mascot. So, Big D, I know you have the richest history with Red Dawn. Why don't you get us started? What are your memories of this film?
Well, let me take you back to the early 1980s. I think my love of the army and military stuff was on Mamaroneck Avenue in the town I grew up in. There was a military and army surplus store that sold old, it wasn't just like ammo cans and, and blanks and knives and mosquito nets. They turned it into like a fashion. So they were selling old military clothes to be trendy. So the place was cool. I used to go in there. I was probably like 8 or 9 years old when I first stumbled into it. And I was just like, what is this? It was like demo bombs from the ceiling and all training aids. It blew my mind. So I started loving this type of stuff. When this came out, I can vividly remember my best friend at the time, Vinnie Wallace. Him and I bought tickets to Cloak and Dagger, which was the kid from E.T., and it was like a spy movie. We'll review that one day, too. We bought tickets to that because it was the big PG movie, and then we snuck off into this theater when the usher wasn't watching. And it shaped, I think, my life for the next few years, and somehow subconsciously led me, I think, to the military. One day I will look up. There is a video that my father shot of Vinnie Wallace and myself around this time, pudgy little kids in camouflage sweatpants at a local, the trapeze. And we were doing our own Delta Force training because we wanted to be ready for the Russian invasion. That will be released at some point.
What the fuck is a local trapeze?
No, whatever, like the jungle gyms, but it's like a jungle gym. It's like a ladder. It's like it's a whole series of obstacles. So we had a training course that he videotaped. Whew. It's something to behold.
I was just imagining the 70s as a decade, like just before I was born, where kids had a trapeze as a regular course of action. Well, Big D, I grew up at Hermosa Green Apartments. And, when we talk about like, do movies or TV influence kids? And I always want to argue that no, like kids are independent thinkers. They understand it's fantasy. Not on this one. Like my friends and I watched Red Dawn. And the older ones who understood what the fuck was going on kind of enlisted the younger ones into our little apartment complex militia. Nice. And we had training exercises.
I see. Did you have a trapeze?
No, we just jumped off of balconies.
I like
it. So second floor balconies, they'd be like, okay, you got to hit the ground this way, do it. And the bigger kids would show us how to do it. And then we would do it too. We also would take grass and put it on flood lamps to heat it up, and then mush it into like a paste and eat that for like sustenance. I couldn't even ride a bicycle. That's how small I was. I had power wheels, and I would ride my power wheels down stairwells, concrete stairwells, because it was like showing your ability to control a vehicle in war.
awesome.
Yeah, I didn't have any of those experiences growing up. I've never seen this. I mentioned that on the last podcast. I don't know why, but I thought this was like a late 80s movie. Like I thought this was like closer to like the 90s. I had no clue it came out in 84, and I also didn't realize how many people were in it. Like I knew Swayze and Sheen were in it, but I didn't realize the others were. I didn't realize there was even any girls. I thought this was like a Young Guns situation here where like it was all dudes, and it wasn't. So it was a completely different film than I expected. I was one when this came out, and so obviously didn't see it in theaters, but you know, these are the reviews that make me most nervous, guys, because this is a movie that a lot of people like, and we get feedback. Like I was recently going through our reviews and reading our reviews again on Apple, like just catching up to see who's reviewed lately. And so many of them are like, they don't understand the movie and the context and the world in which it came out. And it's like, right, because I was one. So, you know, these make me really nervous when I see it for the first time, because were the Soviets really that scary? I don't know.
Well, don't worry, Ash. We will discuss that in this podcast. But yeah, no, I understand. This is one of those films that if you did not grow up in that time, I think it is hard, just like kids that grow up today. People are going to be like, what the fuck? What happened to you when you were growing up as a kid? It's a weird time. The 80s were very strange, and looking back on it, things that seemed normal back then right now seem a little bit odd. But this movie was a big part of my childhood.
And yet, oddly, other movies from the 80s we understand perfectly. You fucking Homer.
It's the way the world is.
All right, let's get to the trailer.
What's going on here, my friend?
This is the emergency broadcast system. We are under attack by conventional forces of the Russian army. It is believed the lead waves were disguised as commercial charter flights. Communications have broken down with other parts of the country. Large areas of the Midwest may have been overrun.
They know who all of you are. They're looking for you.
You're 40 miles behind enemy lines.
I just want to go home. They took a lot of people away.
Where's my dad, Mr. Eckert?
Want to love somebody, Andy. You're gonna die before it happens.
They're gonna kill us! All of us!
So why should we be different?
Because we live here!
Not bad for a bunch of kids, huh? Mama'd be real proud.
In the town of Calumet, Colorado, a teacher pauses upon seeing Soviet troops parachuting from aircraft. He walks outside to question them, and they open fire. Meanwhile, Cuban, Nicaraguan, and Soviet troops are trying to impose order after a hasty occupation. Cuban Colonel Bella instructs the KGB to go to a local sporting goods store and obtain the records of the store's gun sales. Brothers Jed and Matt Eckert, along with their friends Robert Morris, Danny, Daryl Bates, and Arturo Aardvark Mondragon, flee into the wilderness. On the way to the mountains, they run into a Soviet roadblock, but are saved by an attacking U.S. Army gunship.
The movie, the action starts off pretty quick, which I was appreciative of. We got, you know, a tiny little bit of exposition, but it was fine. I mean, it's kind of felt like a disaster film where like you kind of just get like right into it, right? But then like they're at school and these bad guys come in, and they come in parachuting onto the ground. And why were they there? And what was the camo that they were wearing? Like, Big D, as our military expert, what pattern, what wilderness are you blending into with that pattern? Because it looked like an early 90s like couch pattern. Like, it didn't look like the desert at all. And then all of a sudden, the bad guys with their shiny silver parachutes like just open fire. And I don't know about y'all, but for me, this didn't feel like a military invasion. It felt like Independence Day, like fuck all, like alien species coming in, not some military group trying to start World War III.
Well, I would take a guess. That looked like some kind of an urban camouflage. That looked like something you'd find in an Old Navy today. It was like grays, blacks, and whites. Back then, they didn't use any kind of computer technology. People just like threw kind of like lumps of colors together and we're like, yep, that looks like leaves. Yep, that looks like the dirt. Today, it's all abstract shapes. Computers do it, and it's pretty intense, the science of camouflage. But I agree with you. But we're going to go through what the strategy that the film tells us. So sleeper cells secretly infiltrated the Strategic Air Command. Then they opened the door for the Mexicans, the Cubans, and the Nicaraguans. Remember, Nicaragua, it was a threat back then. To then come across the southern border, they then used strategic surgical nuclear strikes to knock out the U.S. capacity to retaliate all the silos throughout the Plain States. Then they wanted to take and hold the American heartland. And what the Russians were going to do is they were going to move in through Alaska, down into the heartland, and then occupy the Rockies to the Mississippi. But they got to a stalemate, and that's where we are right now, where this is the occupied zone. Did it make sense? Not really, because I don't know why the fuck you'd even bother with these hit counts. But to go back to 1980, okay, it seems so strange now to think of the Russians as a legitimate threat, that you would take them serious. Because now they're just like, oh, hello, how are you, comrade? Like, it's a joke how bad the Russian military. I don't take as a legitimate threat, Gene. You take them as a legitimate threat.
Do you want to talk about election interference and cyber attacks?
I'm talking about them landing outside of your science class or your history class or rolling up and putting you in the drive-in internment camp for re-education. No, I'm not talking about them hacking your fucking Facebook account. I'm talking about legitimately rolling up and shooting you through your front door. No, but I want one of my first memories of being really, really afraid was in 1983. The Russians shot down a Korean airliner, Flight 007. They didn't take credit for it. I remember Reagan coming onto TV, and my parents were super tense. And I was like, what's going on? They're like, well, they shot this plane down. There could be a world war. And I'm like, oh, what's a world war? At this point, I'm like 9 years old. You can't even conceive of that. So at this time, Reagan also had the Strategic Defense Initiative, Star Wars. He labeled Russia the evil empire. There was a whole bunch of series of mishaps where, like Able Archer in 83, it was a code name. NATO was running these exercises to kind of simulate what would DEFCON 1, a nuclear attack, be. So they started running countermeasures. The Russians thought they were really using this as a disguise for a real attack. And it took only one U.S. general stood up and said, no, let's stand down, and averted a nuclear catastrophe. This was the worst and closest we came to nuclear war since the Cuban Missile Crisis. So it was legit. You were afraid of what the Russians would do. There was a mystery to them. And if you look at the films, Firefox, we're going to be reviewing soon, is one of those movies. War Games, The Day After, which anyone who's listening to this, who's old enough to remember, it terrified you. It was a mini series on TV about nuclear war and what would happen to your neighbors as they started to die slowly from radioactive poisoning. There were movies like Rambo 3, you have Spies Like Us, and Red Dawn, of course. This shit impacted kids. It impacted anyone in this generation to where you were legitimately scared of the Russians.
Yeah, and they do make an effort to explain why there is a conventional war happening on U.S. soil. As you pointed out, Big D, like the missile silos got taken out. The two things I think they failed to address is, one is, what about our Navy? Like the nuclear fleet that's not in the heartland. That the U.S. would be banging on Moscow's door with nukes like within a second. But the other one is just like, what an absolute bloodbath it would be if anybody were to invade the U.S. Like Americans, you get on our streets and it's going to be like the worst house-to-house fighting you've ever seen in your life. I was surprised by how quickly the city of Calumet just rolled the fuck over.
Doctrine says you need a 3-to-1 force advantage to take any kind of urban or population center. So I don't know that they could have done it, but I respect these fucking kids. The Wolverines, they didn't hem and haw. They weren't like, oh, what's happening here? Immediately, they're in the truck. Shit's getting blown up. They're, Jed's driving through town. They go to the fucking gas station. They load up on guns. They load up on Rice Krispies. They load up on a football. They're not panicked. They're keeping their heads. And they're like, we're getting out to the hills. We will determine what's going on there. Now, how many people would just stand around frozen by fear? These kids were not.
See, I think that's the most unrealistic part of this entire movie is that there would not be any like decisiveness. They would be panicked. I mean, I think they would be kids. They would act like seniors in high school. And that's why I love shows like my very favorite, not that, zombies equate to communist, right? Which, by the way, I think everybody should actually read the Communist Manifesto and understand that communism isn't scary. But anyhow, Black Summer is the best zombie show ever, and everyone on there fucks up so royally. Like, they make so many mistakes that they're constantly getting themselves killed because people in super stressful situations make stupid mistakes, like in a global pandemic causing a toilet paper shortage, right? Like, that's what happens, and I didn't think this was super realistic at all.
Well, the boys learn that Jed and Matt's father is being held in a re-education camp. Mr. Eckert reminds them he had purposely raised them in a strenuous manner, ordering them to avenge their mother's death. The kids visit the Masons behind enemy lines in occupied America. Robert's father was executed because of the inventory the kids had taken from his store. The Masons ask Jed and Matt to take care of their granddaughters, Tony and Erica. After killing Soviet soldiers in the woods, the youths begin a resistance. The occupation forces begin executing groups of civilians following every Wolverine attack. During one of these mass executions, the fathers of Jed, Matt, and Aardvark are killed.
So if you've not seen the movie in a while, at this point in the film, they go to visit their dads in this re-education camp, which Big D gave the spoiler for a few minutes ago is at the drive-in. And I question the security in these places because the kids just walk up, they're holding onto the fence, they're having like a really long heart-to-heart with their dads. It isn't even dark. Like, there is a giant spotlight highlighting them and their fathers. Jed and Matt's dad starts screaming, "Avenge me!" Like, you're calling so much attention to yourselves. How were they not taken right there and killed?
Well, I think at this point in the movie, Bella, the colonel from Cuba, they're trying to win hearts and minds of the people. They still haven't gone full Soviet. They're thinking, hey, you can't separate the families because you're going to build more little terrorist Wolverine groups. So they're letting families get together. And yes, the guards, they should have listened to this.
Avenge me! Avenge me!
If I'm a guard at a tower, I'm gonna be like, okay, what's going on over there? Who are these three guys working out into the woods? But I wouldn't even try to re-educate this population. If you just look at this town, it's in the middle of nowhere. There's no strategic value. There's no big factories. Put this in a town that maybe built tanks. So they're going to make all the people in the town continue to build tanks, but except for the Russians now. But Ash, you asked the question a couple minutes ago that you don't think kids would really be this prepared. They would be making bad decisions. But Jed and Matt's dad, he's abusive, right? There's a little subplot going on here where he's like, I was tough on you both, and I did things that made you, and he pauses dramatically, made you, hate me sometimes, but you understand now, don't you? You can't afford to cry anymore. I don't want either of you to cry again, okay? Just isn't the dad trying to just justify being a shitty dad who just maybe abused his kids and made them grow up too quick?
I'll take that a step further and say not only is he abusive and a shithead, but the things that he's telling them, it's toxic shit that doesn't actually help with survival. Like, that's a lie that people are told. It's like, I was hard on you and treated you like shit so that you would toughen up and that would help you survive. Bearing your feelings, there's no evidence that that is going to make you live longer or make better decisions. And I'm pretty sure that's why they chose Harry Dean Stanton as the dad. Like, he's a man who cannot help but look like an abusive, alcoholic, toxic father. The man looks like shit in every role. And beyond that, I don't think the movie's trying to tell us that they do make good decisions because of the upbringing they had. In fact, they make tactical errors all over the place. They strike inside of the secure zone of the enemy, which just enrages the enemy. as opposed to sticking to your own ground and, maybe the enemy leaves you alone. And beyond that, people end up getting all kinds of fucked up because these kids are listening to their fucking dad instead of running for the hills.
Yeah, and let's talk about how the kids respond to their dads, because like at this point, Big D talks all the time about how we've done this long enough. You kind of pick up like cues along the way of like what directors or what, the actors want you to feel. And like you can tell pretty heavy-handed here that this scene at the camp, they're wanting you to feel some emotion, right? They're wanting you to feel like, oh God, this is such a moment, right? Like a Schindler's List or a Saving Private Ryan type moment where you're mourning for the loss of the fabric of like American society. And instead, you get Charlie Sheen crying, "Daddy." Like, and that's how he says it. And like the bad acting from Charlie Sheen and surprisingly Patrick Swayze, who I adore. I love Patrick Swayze. No other person on the planet could get away with a stupid line like nobody puts baby in a corner other than Patrick Swayze because he's got so much charisma. Even him here, their bad acting is going to haunt my dreams.
I totally agree. And anybody who questions this, think about this. Charlie Sheen and Patrick Swayze are capable of doing great things on screen. 2 years after Red Dawn, Charlie Sheen's on Platoon, which we just covered. He's great. 3 years after Red Dawn, you got Swayze in his iconic role in Dirty Dancing. Like, these guys aren't bad, and they're not bad at expressing emotion. It's just the way that this was shot, the things they were asked to say, and the setting they were asked to say them in. It all comes together in a perfect turd of a moment.
So I think it's a mix of that they were all rookie actors, basically. This was a lot of their first big roles. And also the conditions that the conditions they filmed under were terrible. Swayze got frostbite.
You don't think it had anything to do with the fact that they were expected to do a serious dramatic scene under the direction of the guy that shot Conan the Barbarian?
That could have affected. But I'm starting to question also some of the characters in town and some of their motivations. We get to meet the Masons who live out in this farm, and the boys come by, and they come in like heroes, and the Mr. Mason's clearing out the weapons. He's sitting them down by the fireplace, and they get some coffee, and they're going to sit down there and talk. And he says, I want you guys to take care of something for me, a family heirloom. And he pulls out the granddaughters, right? And he says, I don't want to take them on. I can't do this. He says, come on, Jed. Jed, you got to do it. And Jed goes, okay, I promise I'm going to look out for them. I'm going to take care of them, right? Bullshit. Everything Jed does is to put these two women at risk. He uses one of them for rape bait on a bicycle in the gas station, and then makes her run through the field and hopes she's not running through the field of fire as they pop up out of the ground shooting. Then the other one walks into town to bomb the Russian HQ. Okay. He uses then Erica to go run out and check the boxes for food, which I thought was poisoned. I would have just poisoned the food and you would have gotten them. Does he let everybody out? No. Jed says patiently wait, watches her eat, waits a couple seconds to see if she convulses. Once she doesn't die, then he puts her out there. He's doing everything but take care of these two girls.
Yeah, with the exception of that weird argument over who was going to do the dishes, these girls are subhuman in this movie. They're basically creatures. The most development we get, or most backstory we get, is in one case when they're asking what's up with Erica. It's like, quote, something happened to her. And we don't even get an explanation on that. Was it rape? Was it PTSD, alien abduction? Was there something that I missed in the movie? Like, I get that she's a little off and she's crushing on old dudes, but I need a little bit more from the movie than something happened to her.
Well, they have that really awkward scene where he's like, what's up your ass? And she's like, don't ever say that to me ever. So I assumed she'd been raped in the butt.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I thought she had been assaulted somehow, but you got to respect, they incorporated her into the battles. They all took key positions. They didn't have her staying back at camp and cooking food. They were running out there. They were doing covert ops. They were manning the big guns. The girls took the M60 on multiple ambushes.
Yeah, that doesn't qualify as being a character. Getting to shoot something.
Oh, in this case it does.
and if there is anything about this movie that I will applaud is that when the battle started, like when they first started fighting back, I expected it to be one of those things where it's like, they're killers now. And they didn't do it that way. That first battle was a fucking mess. You got kids that are like shooting arrows in a Russian's backs, and the Russian doesn't die immediately. He starts like staggering away with an arrow in his ass. He's like, they don't know where to fire their rifles to kill. They're just hitting guys like 10, 20 times, with small caliber rifles, and they're just staggering around screaming. It's messy. And I wish we could have had a more gradual rise from this amateur hour of a strike to when they become this elite special forces hit squad. Like, take me through that process, and it makes the action a little more interesting. I want to see them develop a little bit. And the movie made no attempt to do that. Instead, we just got the same battle scene over and over and over again.
Yeah, I loved especially like how clumsy Tony was with the rifle. Like, she picks it up and then like she shoots it and it like falls out of her hands because of like the kick, right? And I have to tell you, like, it looks like me in a situation like this. Like, that's what would happen to me. I would have like a very steep learning curve in terms of how to be a killer, much like, Jamie Lee Curtis in True Lies when like the Uzi falls down the stairs, right? It's the same idea, but like Eugene, like it's like one scene she's like that and it's super realistic, and then like 10 minutes later she's got like a cigarette hanging out of her mouth and she's a fucking marksman in a tower. I mean, it was real quick.
And before anybody writes in and says, well, there were months between some of these battles, we get that. What I'm saying is I wanted to see the development.
Agreed.
The Wolverines meet American F-15 fighter pilot Lieutenant Colonel Andrew Tanner, played by Powers Boothe, who is shot down by Cuban MiGs. He informs them of the current state of the war. Tanner assists the Wolverines in organizing raids. They draw on the attention of a Soviet general who orders reprisals against the civilian population. The escalating attacks lead to the high command of both sides of the war to know the name Wolverines, and the Soviet generals publicly state that the area may not be pacified for much longer.
So I know I've complained a lot about many things in this movie, but one thing that I actually thought was good was this character of Tanner. I thought that his explanation, it was a really great way for us to find out what was happening in the rest of the world and kind of orient ourselves with like the place within the war. Also, as Big D kind of laid out earlier, we get a little bit of the strategy for how they infiltrated. And I don't know, I think it was really nice to have like that adult there because it made it better, because the teens, just as dynamic and charming as these actors are on their own and in many other movies together, like they just weren't interesting together. And so they needed to bring somebody in who was. And I love that he became this role model. He became this leader. It was actually a really enjoyable performance from Powers Boothe. And it reminded me, so there's this movie that I have like a soft spot for called Now and Then. And then there's this scene in it where the girls, these young girls, they meet a Vietnam vet like on the side of the road. And he like tells them about the war and they share like a cigarette with him. And it's like this really powerful moment of the movie. And every scene that Tanner was in felt like that too. And for me, that took at least a half wipe off of this whole thing.
Well, I'm going to add that half wipe right back because they put Powers Boothe in a movie and didn't include his mustache. Like, this is fucking Curly Bill. This is Cy Tolliver from Deadwood. This man derives 80% of his power and charm from his mustache. He looks like a freak without it. I couldn't look at the screen.
I love the fact that we're reminded that these are kids. He goes through this entire model like plan about the execution of this raid. He's like, okay, you guys, we're going to do over here. You're going to go hit that nest. You're going to go flank from the right. Then you're going to go. And they're all like, what's a flank?
Right. And they took out several Soviet platoons without knowing what a flank is.
Yeah, I guess they're just naturals. But the movie, they couldn't decide what they were going to do. And in researching this, I learned there was a lot of the movie that was cut out. So there's actually a DVD commentary for this movie where Lea Thompson describes, quote, a beautiful love scene between her and Lieutenant Colonel Tanner. She is 13 years younger than he is. He is married, has kids. And the underage Erica actually says, oh, I'm going to die before I make love. Will you make love to me? And Tanner goes, okay, and they disappear off frame, make love. So this is why you see later on, she's devastated. She's crying, I'll never be in love again, because there's this whole love scene that they cut out. And Lea Thompson said, I was devastated that they cut it out. It was, quote, a nice scene, and this was the reason I agreed to do the film. What the fuck is going on in Lea Thompson's head?
Well, so first of all, she's like 18. I mean, she's a senior in high school. She's 18. She's of age.
I don't think we established that.
By this point, she's a hardened war veteran, Big D.
That's true.
So that gives her a little bit of age of consent here. Secondly, I know he's married, but he makes very clear that like his family probably is dead. And it's the end of the fucking world. What are you going to do at the end of the world other than have sex? And who wants to die a virgin? No one.
Ash makes a very good point here that us two men in our 40s are like, well, I can't believe she's trying to have sex with this man. Where we watch her kill like 40 people. We're like, that's fine.
Yeah.
Not a problem. But sex?
I'm just surprised none of the Wolverines tried to jump on that grenade first.
Well, something happened to her, Big D. But yeah,
that's true, very true.
But you got a point there. Like, these guys are young, they're cute, they're not married, and they're probably virgins too. Like, fucking Aardvark. What's wrong with Aardvark?
No, Aardvark's a hero. He's undersold. We never remember Aardvark as one of the major heroes. He had so many moments in this. He is the first one who yells, Wolverines! In my mind, I would have bet my life that was Sheen. No, that's Aardvark. Who's the one who jumps up to help Tanner on the tank? It's Aardvark. Aardvark is a hero, man. He should be the first one on that stone. Carve his name big. But we talk about how movies change through time now when we were kids. Today, we get John Wick. We get all of these super hyper violent movies that are just normal. This movie, which seems kind of quaint, this was the first PG-13 movie released. And it seems violent, but whatever. You see a dude with an arrow in his back. Nobody's head explodes. Nothing really bloody or gory happens compared to the shit now, right? At the time, the Guinness Book of World Records said this was the most violent film ever. Red Dawn averaged out to 134 acts of violence per hour. That's 2.23 per minute. This movie today looks like soft PG. This isn't that bad, but at the time, for this to be the most violent film ever.
But what's crazy, Big D, is you're saying that stat of 134 acts of violence per hour, but somehow none of it is exciting. I don't know if it's the result of the way people die, like every communist soldier needs to do like an arabesque like after he gets shot, or the fact that we just get the same guerrilla attack over and over again. They're all lined up behind some rocks. Some unsuspecting commies are going to come by. They're going to shoot them with machine guns. Someone's going to throw a grenade. Someone's going to hit the plunger down. Claymores are going to go off. And then they go, collect the spoils. Totally unimaginative. And at this point in the movie, I'm starting to sympathize with the occupation forces because I actually know them. Like, they have real characters. They're more colorful than the Wolverines. The bad guys get all the cool lines. They get backstories. And I especially like that the movie took the time, and this is a credit to Milius's writing because he does this really well. He gives us the viewpoint of American life from the way outsiders describe it to mirror the way we describe the lives of other countries and the affairs of other countries. They refer to the Eagle Scouts as a paramilitary group, and they call the Wolverines, like this high school team, like a sports collective. I appreciate it, but I got to ask why, because it goes nowhere. The story is just meandering. They're giving us color to all these characters that ultimately don't matter.
Yeah, I think it's a mistake. Like when that Russian soldier at the first ambush, that pathetic ambush, he's like, I can speak English. I'm going to translate for you. And he translates like the description of this campground, like it's 40,000 feet. And he's like, over 35,000 Indians were killed at this site. He obviously doesn't know what it is, but he's just feeding into that image that we don't know our enemy, that we think the Russians are the bad guys. They're evil. The communism is just a vampire out there going to kill democracy. So there is a subtle undertone of this is an anti-war film disguised as a very, very pro-war film. And at the end, I'll kind of go over it, but it's showing that we don't know each other and we're all the same.
Visiting the front line, Tanner and Aardvark are killed in the crossfire of a tank battle. Daryl is caught by the Soviets after being turned in by his father, a mayor trying to appease the occupying forces. He's forced to swallow a tracking device and rejoin the guerrillas. A Spetsnaz unit with tracking equipment is sent after him, but they are ambushed by the Wolverines. Daryl pleads for mercy and is executed by a hardened Robert after Jed executes a Spetsnaz operative.
I believe that the little title card at this point says it's November. And so it's getting cold. And now all of a sudden they've moved from their couch camo to snow gear. And they have a shit ton of guns, a shit ton of ammo. They have a shit ton of food. They have these fancy bicycles to do pranks on the enemy with and get the enemy killed because of them. But like, how are they getting all of this shit? Because they're living in the woods. Where are their supplies coming from? How do they keep building them back up? How is there a scene where they're eating like those snowball things, like at 7-Eleven? Like they're eating those. They've got snackies, guys. I'm really confused.
I think we're meant to understand that they're stealing all this shit from the enemy. I don't have a problem with them being resupplied. They're guerrillas. Let's assume that whatever the commies are wearing, they're killing them and taking it off of them, although suspiciously there's no bullet holes or blood on their gear.
Sure.
And that's the issue I have is I spend 2 days in the woods and I look like fucking Pigpen from Peanuts. But these guys are all squeaky clean throughout the movie.
I mean, forget in the woods. Anytime I wear like a white shirt or like, God forbid, white pants, like I come home and look like, I like not a human because everything gets on them. So there's absolutely no way. And another thing that's really unrealistic for me, let's talk this script. Okay, we've talked melodrama before. We've talked bad scripts before. But this one, I got to tell you, there's some gems here. And I've got a few of my favorites. I'll never love again. But if you didn't love anyone, you wouldn't be here. Then there's, you're running pretty short on fillings, aren't you? One of my favorites, if the fox stole your chicken, would you slaughter the pig because of the fox? I'm killed, huh, Jed? And then, it's hard being brothers, isn't it?
Ain't it?
That one got me. I was like, I really did think like, God, what's it like to have a brother? That must be.
I did too.
Oh, God. Well, I have one and didn't think that. And then the final one, probably my favorite, was, it feels like forever since I was a small boy in the sun. Y'all, this script is so damn serious. You need a little bit of levity here. Even in war, as unrealistic as this war is, there are moments of levity. Not in Red Dawn, though. In Red Dawn, things are too bad to be taken lightly.
Okay, listen, I think it's in the delivery, number one. Okay, this is a line you didn't give, but this is at the point where Tanner realizes some of the Wolverines are going off the deep end. They're starting to go and be desensitized to the violence. Let's just listen here.
All that hate's gonna burn you up, kid.
Keeps me warm.
He's cold. He's a cold-hearted killer. See, if you read that, Ash, your way, it might seem comical. But it's because there's so many parts of the movie they cut out. When Jed finds out that Daryl has gone back into town, the dad sold him out, he made him swallow the transmitter, he comes out and he says, it doesn't matter, we're going to have to. He shoots the Russian. He's then going to kill Daryl, but can't do it. Daryl gets killed anyway, and Jed, at that point, is devastated. And you're like, why? This doesn't make sense. Jed sits down and pulls out the picture from his pocket. It's a picture of him and Daryl as kids playing Little League together. They were friends. There was a whole subplot that showed the relationships between these kids that they just removed from the movie.
Okay, so take 2 minutes that you wasted on a fucking useless gun battle.
I agree.
And build some suspense up when they're trying to figure out what the tracker is tracking. I can't believe they were like, it's beeping toward him. Let's kill him. Like there was no sussing it out.
Yeah, I totally wish, because it seems like all the pieces to fix this movie are in the cutting room floor. I would love if somebody could go back and do like a master's edition edit of this. I doubt it'll happen, but it's possible. But I think all the pieces are the build. Why do they care about each other? Why is each death impactful? Then you build up the suspense. Oh shit, Daryl's gone again. Where is he? Maybe then we see him in town. You could fill in all the holes.
And while we're in the rewrite business, Ash talked about levity. There are times when you could insert some levity that would actually illustrate how the boys have changed over time. If they were goofballs and fun kids at the beginning, and then by the end they turn into these, hardened warriors, you might see some development there. But from the beginning, they're at each other's throats. They're all pissed off to begin with. And one example is like that deer blood scene. It was stupid as fuck. They're telling them you drink the deer blood and you're changed. Yeah, you're changed because you got fucking bacteria and parasites in your body now. I was 100% certain that this was going to be a joke. That like as soon as he starts drinking the deer blood, Jed and Matt start laughing like, you dumb fuck, you drink deer blood. No, it's totally fucking serious. Robert's like, yeah, I feel changed now, and he does change, right? Like that's the message there from because he drank the blood of his first kill. You can have that joke of a prank and not ruin the realism of the movie.
Is this a chance that this is because we did not grow up in a rural area? That because fathers and sons, they go out in the first kill, where you have to either do something with the heart. This doesn't happen.
I've talked to my friends, both native and white, about the hunt and killing and drinking the blood of your first kill, and they're like, yeah, in movies. So yeah, it's just Hollywood shit. The remaining Wolverines are ambushed by helicopter gunships, and Tony and Robert are killed. Jed and Matt attack the Soviet headquarters in Calumet to distract the troops while Danny and Erica escape. The plan works, but both Jed and Matt are mortally wounded. Colonel Bella finds the brothers, but motions them on. The brothers reach a bench in the park where they spent time as kids, holding each other as they die. Meanwhile, Danny and Erica trek through the Rocky Mountain wilderness, reaching the frontier of free America. If this movie were any good at all, as a drama, a war movie, whatever category you want to put it in, we should be sobbing at this point. We got a bench scene. The description of it has more emotional punch than the actual scene did. I mean, imagine that. You watch two brothers go from idyllic high school life to dying on the bench where they grew up. Like, that is heart-wrenching in concept. I'm watching it on screen. I literally don't care at all. That's what a poor job they did with this movie.
I couldn't agree more. And I'll tell you, I'll take it one step further. I found myself just distracted by trying to find out where Patrick Swayze was wounded. Because like Charlie Sheen is like all crumpled up and covered in blood. And Patrick Swayze just has got like, a little bit of a bruise on his face. He looked super clean and healthy. And I was just going, is he going to die? Or is he just going to hold him until he's dead? Didn't care at all that they might both die.
That's the swing set where their father used to push them. So I think all the pieces are here. There's just something with the way it's put together that they didn't focus on what was important.
Yeah, it's John Milius royally fucking this up.
Yeah.
This guy is a giant in film writing. He made up Go Ahead, Make My Day. He wrote Jeremiah Johnson. He was a fucking founder of the UFC and invented the fighting octagon. This is the man who wrote The Life and Times of Judge Roy Bean, one of the best Newman films ever. And he gave us Conan the Barbarian. I don't know how this man went from all that to basically a movie that says we're all fucked if we don't arm ourselves and get tough as hell.
Well, I think when he signed on to do the movie, there was another script already completed. He didn't like it, rewrote it, and whether maybe he was under a time constraint. But the movie does have mixed messages. Earlier on, I said I thought it was anti-war because even though we're seeing the fuck yeah, we're going to defend our country. Dad made us hard. We're going to do it. Hold it in. Let it turn. Let it turn. But I think at its core, they were trying to close with this anti-war message. You get Colonel Bella, who throughout has been saying, I've lived the insurgent life my whole life. It's strange for me to be on the other side of that now. He's reading that letter in his head. We hear the exposition from his wife, and he's talking about how he just wants to be home with her. He's done with war. He's done with what it's done to him, what he's seen people do, And throughout the movie, they sprinkle in moments where the Wolverines realize we're no different than the Russians. We killed one of our friends. We're all the same here, One nation's patriot is another's terrorist. So I think that message got lost. And when they die on that swing set, you're right, Gene. We should have been like, oh, these poor boys, look what's come of them. But we don't, And then they go full balls to the wall, 180 degrees from this war ended just like all wars end. Dun, 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 dun. And we get the action shots of all the cast with their guns. I wish they had stuck with that. The war ended and kind of somber, leave people thinking, was it worth it? Would you have gone to freedom, the free territory? But instead, they just had to do the flag waving. It was a miss for me.
Yeah, I actually sat there and like my jaw like fell open when the credits started because of how ballsy like those credits were after this movie. It was so much like Young Guns, which if you remember on that episode, I talked about how ridiculous I thought the credits were in Young Guns. And the thing I found most disturbing about it is, that like they thought long and hard about what each character would do and what they would look like. And they all wanted to look badass and almost like playing cards, right? Like baseball cards, like here's the Red Dawn cards. And I don't know. I know it's such an 80s thing, but I also think it's like slightly like kind of nefarious, right? Like these patriotic quote unquote movies like this, you're supposed to walk away being like, America, fuck yeah. But you walked away from this like, what was it? What did they do? What was their sacrifice? They died. They wrote their name on a rock, but I don't know, guys. This one left me feeling a little empty.
See, war, there's nobody wins. That's the point.
Especially the moviegoer.
Well, now's the time in the pod where we give our wipe score. The wipe score is our way of telling you how many wipes this movie would take to get off your respective butts. 0 wipes is a perfect movie. It is hitting a moving attack chopper with an RPG and only killing the waist gunner for some reason. 5 wipes is an absolute disaster of a movie. It's when something happened to you. Ash, we'll start with you. How many wipes do you give Red Dawn?
So I'm sorry to say that 2 weeks in a row, I'm going to have 2 4-wipe movies. This one is just so serious and it's so boring in its seriousness. And guys, again, there are great people in it. And I came into it wanting it to be a good time. I wanted it to be enjoyable and fun. But the only word I could like use to describe it is it's just like a sludge to get through. Because like if I had to describe this movie, I would say it's narrative sound bites in between shootouts with a weirdly bad script. And even the credits are so damn serious. It makes the whole thing laughable and just a bummer. And this is not about me being like, oh, well, I'm not seeing it in the world in which it came out. Bad dialogue was also, it had to have been bad in 84 too, right? 4 wipes.
Yeah, Ash, I'm going to back you up on that. This is a survivalist, abusive dad's wet dream excuse for hitting on teen girls, being emotionally absent, collecting guns to feel powerful, and being a fucking xenophobe. The action was not exciting. The drama was not compelling, and there was no comedy, which leads me to ask, does this movie even have a fucking genre? We got on Lawrence Kasdan's ass for like being creepy about a young girl in Indy's relationship. This is 100 times creepier, weirder, and less interesting. There are movies that compete with this theme. You talk about like Taps or Toy Soldiers that are so much more fun to watch than this. It was just bad. It's 4 wipes.
So, Gene, I got a question. Another movie in this time, similar concept, War Games.
Loved it.
Yeah, same.
Okay, so you're consistent there. This movie, I'm going to give it 1 wipe. Okay, if you compare it to the genre, okay, the action movie in the 80s was not as developed as it is now.
This wanted to be Platoon. You know that, right? Like, this is a movie that set out to have the emotional resonance of Platoon, and they failed horribly. This was not set out to be an action film. This was meant to be like a warning and a piece of propaganda and a bunch of young, good-looking, red-blooded Americans out there fighting for patriotism. This wanted to be Platoon, Big D. Oh, wow.
Whatever. I know I've rose-tinted glasses. To me, I enjoyed the first 2/3 of the movie a lot. I really did. I saw its flaws, but it didn't matter. I just loved it. I loved the giant flying fortress. I loved all the ambush scenes. I loved the cheesy acting. not everything has to be necessarily serious, like I'm trying to get an award. There's some entertaining movies. I was entertained by it. So I think that's what it is. I was entertained by the topic. I wish that they had filled in the holes so that we got to see them develop tactically. I wanted to see what was going on in the town. What was life like? The stores are empty. Show me that. Build the world a little bit. Carry through the anti-war message at the end. But for me, I don't care. I know it's not a great movie, but I think it's so close to it. I would watch it again. I loved it. I will not be apologetic. I really did like this movie. It defies logic. I understand that.
And the rating system.
This is Grease 2 for you. It makes no sense that you think the blood of the pistol and the... What's that fucking song?
Okay, first of all, Grease 2 is meant to be campy.
But it's shit.
This is bad, but not campy. Camp forgives bad. This is not meant to be camp.
You get joy out of it being shitty and you defend it as campy. I can defend this as like over-the-top patriotic action. And I could say, no, they weren't trying to be Platoon. You'll say they were being Platoon, and I'll say you can't prove that.
I will point out that this movie came out 2 years after Rambo First Blood.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to talk about a serious...
And that's a great movie.
Movie about war that happens on American soil and has some gravity to it.
That I felt they were taking serious. That I feel the tone was very different.
So let's say Rambo First Blood is a one white movie. You're saying that this is on par with that?
No, I think it's better.
I'm sorry, you think
this is
Red Dawn
better than Rambo?
No, I think Rambo First Blood, the first one, is much better. I think I might give that a 0.25.
So you're saying this is within an arm's reach of Rambo First Blood?
Okay, when you put it that way. My mind is a blur. We did not do the first Rambo, right? That's coming up.
No, we've only done First Blood Part 2.
That's what I thought. So it's on the schedule. That's why I'm confused.
Yeah, Rambo I love.
Okay, see now you've gotten me into a corner because I'm like, okay, even if Rambo First Blood is like a half wipe, is this shit. I think they're trying to do something different. Okay, like they're being serious. I'm staying with the one wipe.
Oh, wow.
It defies logic. I'm sorry. I'm not doing it intentionally. I'm not doing it punitively. I just can't explain my feelings.
Hey, listen, the Wolverines beat back the communist threat so that you could have the wipe score that you want, Big D. That's your freedom as an American.
That's why their name's on the rock.
4 wipes from Ash, 4 wipes from me, and 1 wipe from Big D gives us an average wipe score of 1.6 wipes repeating for Red Dawn.
No, it doesn't. It gives us an average wipe score of 3.
Oh, sorry, 9. Sorry. Let me try that again. All right. I thought that was weird. All right. So
math.
So 4 wipes from Ash, 4 wipes from me, and 1 wipe from Big D gives us an average wipe score for Red Dawn of 3 wipes.
Well, Gene, with a score of 3 wipes, I feel like I'm Jed and Matt sitting on the park bench in the park, slowly bleeding to death, sad. That now places Red Dawn in the 153 spot. It is tied with Blade Runner, The Boondock Saints, Christmas Vacation,
Christ.
Commando, Grease 2, Mortal Kombat, Over the Top, and Revenge of the Nerds. So there's a big block there at 3 wipes. But yeah, I guess, you see, Grease 2.
People are going to burn this podcast to the fucking ground.
No, listen to the patriotic music playing. You can't burn this podcast to the ground.
Oh my God, it is Blade Runner. Jesus Christ. I'm fine with the Grease 2 thing if that's what you want to do, but Mortal Kombat and Blade Runner are far superior films to this.
Oh, I think Blade Runner is. I acknowledge. I will go back one day. I have to retcon my Spaceballs, my Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and Blade Runner needs to be a rewatch. It has to be. We were amateurs at that point. We weren't as professional as we are today.
What kind of dirt does Carrie have on you?
No, I think it's actually a decent. The director's cut, the final ultimate edition, whatever it is, I think is good.
Jesus.
All right. Well, I didn't see any of that coming. Thank you, Hong, for this commission. And Big D, let's get to the voicemail for the week.
Gene, our first voicemail has to do with Blade Runner 2049 and Dave Bautista.
Hey there, this is Riley calling again. Listen, I just listened to the If Looks Could Kill, and I got a problem with what Ash said. She said something about Dave Bautista being just some guy who stands there and he's nothing without the Drax the Destroyer makeup. Listen, watch Blade Runner 2049. That's the best parts of the movie is his 5 minutes of dialogue. He's amazing in that movie. He's great in that Zack Snyder Army of the Dead. He's a great actor. So do not talk bad about my boy. And also second thing I need to add, you guys mentioned something about school systems not teaching second languages. Fun fact, here in Canada it is mandatory to graduate to have a French credit, but I'm an idiot and I never got my French credit, but I graduated anyway. I beat the system. So you guys have a good one. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. You guys take care. Yeah, bye-bye.
It sounds like they're having a lot of fun up in Canada. Every time we get a call from Canada, it's just like, woo! But Riley, thanks for calling in. I have not seen Blade Runner 2049 or Army of the Dead. So if anybody has and wants to share an opinion on that.
I will back him up. I was going to say it when Ash discussed it originally. There's a scene in the Zack Snyder, the Army of the Dead, where he's having a discussion with his estranged daughter that feels very genuine. I think he has moments, he has potential that The Rock does not to be a serious actor.
I thought that movie was terrible. Total missed opportunity for a really cool zombie film. But Blade Runner 2049, yeah, I mean, everybody, I guess, gets one every now and again. Although I wasn't a huge fan of that movie either, despite being a massive fan of the original Blade Runner.
Well, I will have you know, Ash, that Riley did call in shortly after leaving this voicemail in true Canadian fashion and apologized because he felt like he was too mean to you on the voicemail.
Yeah, I listened to that, and Riley, you trust me. If that was mean, man, you should hear some of the other ones we get. You were just fine, friend. I support your guy. I support that.
Well, that was mean in Canada. That was a Canadian kind of mean.
Yeah, it's a different litmus test. Yeah.
Yes. So, Gene, our last voicemail comes from Nick Cobb, and it covers the Seventh Sign.
Hey guys, Nick Cobb calling in from San Francisco. Just finished If Looks Could Kill podcast. Good one. I also was just as I was listening to whoever called in to comment about Back to the Future 3, and we were talking about not we, I guess that was in theory, about how to power the DeLorean. It just popped in my head, and I was like, fuck, I could be wrong, but like as far as fuel for this DeLorean goes, didn't this motherfucker in like part 2 just pop in like a banana peel and a fucking Miller Lite, which was like, like 3% alcohol. It's like he just fills it in the tank, and then he goes, roads, where we're going, there are no, or something like that. But like the fuel thing, if this guy's really that smart, like he'll figure it the fuck out. Like the one shot of whiskey knocks him on his ass, but you can't use that whiskey to fuel the DeLorean. I don't know. It just seems weird that like surely there's a banana peel somewhere in the Old West. And then I guess while I'm here, I might as well just say the Seventh Sign podcast is really good too. And Gene, I feel you. I've been like Ash, as a recovered former religious person, or younger in life, Catholic, which explains a lot. I'm with you, Gene. I'm an atheist now. I just read this book on the God paradox, and it is weird. It's almost like we're so careful not to offend anybody else's religion. You know, we accept everybody, except for when it comes to atheism, which is sort of what I've been struggling with for the last couple of years. Like people will just sort of write you off or say, oh, come on, you don't really believe in. And I'm like, imagine if you did that to somebody else's religion. So as my non-religion, I don't know, just a thought. I've been struggling with it, but sort of come to terms with it. All right, I'm just rambling. Going back in the kitchen. Talk to you guys later.
So now, Gene, I'm going to do this for you. I'm going to try to help you out here, okay?
Yeah.
I was not on the Back to the Future Part 3 review. I have not seen it, to be honest, in probably 8-10 years, okay? But I can answer his questions. You already said them last week. Mr. Fusion fuels the flux capacitor. Gasoline fuels the DeLorean. Your thing about Doc Brown being a smart guy, he was trying to distill alcohol. He actually blew out the combustion engine, didn't he? He was testing it, if I'm correct.
That is absolutely correct, yes.
So those two things. So Gene answered those last week. So thank you for calling in, but pay more attention to Gene Lyons.
Oh, I like that. Also, bananas were present in North America since 1870. So there might have been a banana peel lying around.
I just appreciate the fact that Nick Cobb's called in. He's one of my favorite of our listeners and, always has some bougie opinions about what we should be drinking. So I appreciate that in you, Nick Cobbs.
Well, Gene, next week, we are on the gravy train to 80s and 90s gold that was started with Red Dawn, a fantastic film. Next week, when wrongfully accused of murdering his wife, Richard Kimball escapes from the law in an attempt to find her killer and clear his name. Pursuing him is a team of U.S. Marshals led by Deputy Samuel Gerard, a determined detective who will not rest until Richard is captured. As Richard leads the team through a series of intricate chases, he discovers the secret behind his wife's death and struggles to expose the killer before it is too late. Commissioned by Terrence M., released in 1993, and this is a big 90s film that Shat the Movies was built for.
I love this movie. And the opening of this movie is so scary and started my obsession so early with true crime that has continued on with my obsession through like serial killers and true crime podcasts and the fact that like I fall asleep to, true crime documentaries. Love this movie.
Okay, Ash, I'm going to put you to the test on the spot. You are Deputy Samuel Gerard, okay? I am Kimball, okay? I'm standing. Here, watch, look at me. I didn't kill my wife. Give me the line. Gene?
I don't care.
There you go.
Oh, I thought you were going to do the thing where he jumps and then he says, he just did a Peter Pan right there off that bridge.
No, it's not. I don't care.
Yeah. God, Tommy Lee Jones. I am so stoked about this movie, guys. And hopefully Big D will remember that he gave Red Dawn a one wipe.
Wolverines!
And keep that in mind. When
I will keep that in mind.
There's going to be very little wiggle room going forward, Big D. All right. Thank you to Wong for commissioning Red Dawn. And thank you, Andrew, for commissioning our next film. Thank you to all the commissioners who make this podcast possible. That concludes this week's episode of Shat the Movies. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shat the Movies. You can email us, hosts@shatthemovies.com, or call and leave a voicemail like Nick and Riley did at 914-719-SHAT. You can support the podcast by shopping our Amazon affiliate link, completing a free anonymous survey to help attract advertisers, buying our merch, or commissioning your own movie. Find all that information by visiting our website, shatthemovies.com. You can also check out our sister podcast, Shat on TV. We review TV series such as Lovecraft Country, Westworld, True Detective, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, and Watchmen. Find all that information on our website, shatontv.com. Wherever fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe. And if you stop by iTunes, please leave a 5-star review that helps the podcast grow. On behalf of my co-hosts, Big D and Ash, I'm Gene Lyons. Be sure to join us next week for the following movie.
I came home, there was a man in my house. He had an artificial arm.
Are you saying that I killed my wife? Are you saying that I crushed her skull? And that I shot her?
ladies and gentlemen, listen up. We have a fugitive that's been on the run for 90 minutes. Average foot speed over uneven ground, barring injury, is 4 miles an hour. That will give you a radius of 6 miles. What I want out of each and every one of you is a hard target search of every gas station, residence, warehouse, farmhouse, hen house, outhouse, or dog house in this area. Checkpoints will go up at 15 miles. Your fugitive's name is Dr. Richard Kimball. Go get him.